Hello everyone, and welcome to the Vampire Accounts Legendary Starter Guide for Total War Warhammer. This guide is essentially a updated version of the last starter guide for the Vampire Accounts due to the Beastmen update, since the Beastmen has changed certain conditions and the AI for a couple factions has been changed. Some more aggressive and some more defensive. This guide will focus very differently than from the last one. I would say this is more of a puppeteer strategy than anything. The goal is to capture both Tempelhof and Schwarzwerfen to be your vassals and have them do your bidding in the western side of Sylvania, while you can focus on the north. The hardest part about doing this, although in about 10 turns, is the Vampire Lord that Tempelhof has. Now, if you use Manfred von Kastein, it's very easy. However, the strategy revolves on just building economic buildings in eastern Sylvania and not conquering west. This strategy focuses heavily on the raising the dead. Thus, Heinrich Kemmler is a better choice. That minus 50% discount for the raised dead faction-wide is a pretty big deal. You save yourself a lot of money in building powerful elite units. And focusing on building military buildings isn't that great for the early game for vampire counts, thus the strategy. Plus, we'll make the most out of the starter units for Heinrich, the Hex Wraiths and Karen Wraiths. Plus, those Direwolves are very effective. They're essentially our best flanking units to get around the enemy army and ensnare them into a trap. Right off the bat, you need to keep an eye out on that threat to our northwest, the Vampire Lord Dieter the Stickler. This Vampire Lord is essentially the biggest problem for the initial turns for the vampire counts. But if you can kill that Vampire Lord very quickly and very early, you can essentially ensure that you'll have a very simple campaign. Go ahead and build the gold mine and build yourself a secondary general with preferably good stats. If you don't have good stats, simply just restart the campaign, but that's essentially not a real reason to restart. The real reason is to kill the Vampire Lord to our northwest. Do not raise the dead in Heinrich Kemmler's army, because if you do add more units to your stack, it's going to be hard to kill him. He's going to simply retreat to the garrison closer to Castle Tempelhof, and the chances of you beating him drastically go lower. You do have a chance to win, though, if you just go off by default. It should be a very easy battle.
Destruction.
The biggest problem is the Vampire Lord, and if you get rid of him, essentially you ensure yourself a battle that's going to be 10 times easier. However, with this battle, it's very random in whether or not you will actually kill him. You could destroy the entire army, but there will always be survivors. And if the Vampire Lord is one of the survivors, you're going to have a battle that's going to be much harder. However, for the focus of this guide, I will play the battle just for the fact that the Vampire Lord might survive. The strategy behind this battle is very basic. You essentially have your zombies and your skeleton warriors go to the front line and have them create the line first. Don't try to flank around with your direwolves or your hex wraiths. Let the enemy make the move first, and then you can use that advantage to flank around as well. Because if you do try to attack head-on, you got to keep in mind on Legendary, you have the -5 leadership morale, and the enemy has a buff of +10 leadership to the average stats. So the enemy will win flat out. The only way to really beat Legendary is to kill the Lord very quickly, use artillery, or flank. A head-on-head fight is essentially a fight that your army will lose for sure. Keeping your Lord in range gives you a small bonus in the leadership, but it's very minimal. But at the very least, it's something to counter the debuff. Here I see that the Direwolves are about to engage the Skeleton Warriors, and that's the perfect time to flank around. The skeleton warriors can hold them in place very well. The zombies are moving up, and it's the best chance to move up the hex rates as well. Flank around with the direwolves, hit them in the back. The AI will freak out knowing that it's at a disadvantage. When it comes to the enemy's Vampire Lord, do not engage the Vampire Lord with zombies or skeleton warriors. They're extremely ineffective to the Vampire Lord, since the Vampire Lord has a good chunk of armor, and it also has blood regen. You can regenerate after hitting targets. Not to mention, its magic is also a pretty big problem. If you surround the Vampire Lord with a lot of units that don't have armor pen, it's going to take a lot longer to kill it. Focus only your Hex rates or your Karen rates, or maybe both at the same time, to kill that Vampire Lord. With Heinrich, you can select certain targets to heal up, or overcharge the spell and heal units in a massive AoE. And for here, I was just saving a certain amount of magic in case I really need to use it later on. With the enemy army surrounded and destroyed, I'll just move up my units and then simply overcharge. But since the Lord died very quickly, I wasn't able to. Suffered very minimal casualties, but it was a fine battle. Now, it took me about four or five tries to get battles of which the Vampire Lord survives. If he's dead, then that's perfect for you. That's perfect for your start. However, I'm choosing the worst case scenario of which the Vampire Lord survives and retreats very close to the garrison near Castle Tempelhof. Don't think that he's at a very weak stage, even though he has very low health. During the battle, he can essentially heal himself up back to full. For the tech tree, focus on the Book of the Blood, and since you have one skill point, invest that into the Aura of Supremacy. Give yourself that +5 leadership to counter the legendary debuff. So at the very least, your troops are back at a normal stats-wise for the legendary difficulty. Raise the dead in Eastern Sylvania, and then once you move into Western Sylvania, raise the dead again. And you essentially have yourself a pretty decent-sized stack. Even though it on the auto balance it shows that we have 0 chance at winning, don't worry about it. You can still well, I won't say it's going to be an easy battle, but it will be a very tough battle, which I'll go through here very shortly and help you guys go through this battle. The reason the auto balance is so heavily against us is because of the Vampire Lord. If you could kill him very quickly at the start, then that is a huge deal. You can use your Hex Wraiths Vanguard deployment and the Direwolves Vanguard deployment to quickly attack the Vampire Lord's shattered army very quickly, and maybe you have a chance in taking him out. Now, guarantee this won't always work. This is out of like the 10 times I've done this, it's only worked twice. 2 out of 10 times. Most of the time, the Vampire Lord will survive just because he could just heal himself back up to full. Like, he can heal faster than you can do damage with the Hex Wraiths, even though that the Hex Wraith have armor-piercing attacks. You also have to do this skirmish against the Vampire Lord very quickly. Reinforcements are arriving, and they will send in those bats and direwolves to attack your units. Now you're probably thinking, well, what's the big deal? I mean, the Hex Wraiths can easily beat the bats. Well, yes, that's true, but the very big problem is that since these Hex Wraiths have a leadership debuff and are nowhere near our Lord, and the enemy has a leadership bonus, those bats can simply just hit the flank of our units and they can already start crumbling. We have to hit the enemy general very quickly and then fall back to our units very quickly before these 2 bats and direwolves arrive. For here, I stayed a little bit longer because I really wanted to kill that Vampire Lord, and then I immediately started falling back. Simply look at the morale or leadership bar crumble when the bats hit. My direwolves are about to start crumbling, and about a 5th or a 4th of the leadership morale of the Hex rate started to fall. If we stayed in that combat situation, they would crumble even more. At the moment, I'm essentially baiting the bats to attack my army. I have a huge line of infantry ready to attack, and the bats chose Heinrich. Now I could just use my units and just surround the bats and slaughter them. The bats will freak out and realize that they're being surrounded, but at the very least you could cause a massive amount of damage. As for the main frontline unit, they'll continue moving up and basically create a formation to get ready for the oncoming reinforcements. I did screw up a little there. I didn't lock in the formation, though. The main focus is to wipe out those bats so they don't hit our flank anymore. This battle is all about morale. If we can win the battle with morale, we can win this. The battle could easily be won. I didn't even pay attention to the fact that those dire wolves were flanking around me. But since I have I'm putting the zombies together with the skeletons, it's a very solid formation. Because sometimes the enemy likes to target the skeleton warriors and instead they hit the zombies instead. Which is intentional. I want them to hit these zombies because they're essentially the expendable meat shields. The main armies are arriving and what we're trying to create is a front line. I'm not expecting to win this infantry engagement. The only thing I'm expecting is to create a front line. Get rid of the enemy's flanking units, use the direwolves to flank around, and destroy their direwolf army, or unit. As for the hex rates, you think that we should, flank around and hit the enemy army, but let's keep them in reserve for now. The reason we're doing that is the enemy's zombies are still very slow when they're arriving. They'll get here soon. It's better to wait for the enemy's zombies to get into the line battle, than to flank around. Because if we did flank around with the Karen rates or the Hex rates, the problem is they would more than likely just get trapped between the zombies and the enemy's skeleton warriors. So right now it's just a battle of patience. With Heinrich, you can use the overcharge heal ability. Try to get all your units together to impact as much as healing as possible for your army. Once the zombies are all in the battle, we can then do our plan to flank around the enemy army and hit it from behind. With the Vampire Lord out of the way, this battle has essentially become 10 times easier. Otherwise, we would have to focus the Hex rates and the Karen rates to kill the Vampire Lord. And trying to kill a Necromancer and the Vampire Lord, it's pretty tough, but it's doable. Now, unfortunately, since it's a head-on-head battle, our army is essentially losing due to the enemy's advantage in having a +10 leadership. However, once we hit him in the back with these 3 units, the Direwolves, the Hex rates, and the Karen rates, we should cause a massive panic on the entire, or massive crumbling on the entire formation. Focus the Direwolves to attack zombies instead of skeleton warriors. They're much more effective at killing zombies due to the fact they have no armor. Here we have the entire enemy's leadership bar just completely collapse, and we're essentially winning. If you can find the enemy's Necromancer and kill him very quickly, you can win this battle even faster. Right now it's just a battle of how fast will they crumble. Though this battle might take a little bit of time, your units will be winning, your units will be cutting them down. And once the enemy lord is dead, it is essentially over. Once you win this battle, you have a number of options open, and our primary goal is essentially now is to vassalize Tempelhof. Now, it is. I've thought of a different couple strategies and what you actually do to the enemy. However, sieging Castle Tempelhof seems to be the best option. You want to give your vassal a walled city. Walled cities are very good, and essentially to the fact that if things go to the worst, you can save your vassal from being completely destroyed. Schwarzwerfen only has a village, which is unfortunately makes him very susceptible to being counterattacked and wiped out very easily. Thus, having a stack protecting him is good to have. With our secondary army, with just 3 skeletons and a vampire lord, we can take the Eschen very easily without a problem. The Tempelhof faction will not be making any generals, any units to save its other villages or province or settlements without any issue. You essentially have no challenge. Could you sack? Yes, but it's better to occupy because the movement distance to actually approach Eschen. It's better to take it over, and then you can continue production of more skeleton warriors. The reason we're not upgrading our barracks in Castle Dragonhof is that we're not going to be keeping it. We're basically building very minimal units with very low upkeep and very low demand. We'll destroy the barracks and Eschen so we can build the vineyards to actually have a tradable resource and improve public order. Even though public order is not really that big of a deal for the vampire counts. The tradable resources we'll be using with Schwarzwerfen once they open a trade agreement with us later down the road. Our main army will continue its siege at Castle Tempelhof, and it will stay there until we've secured all the surrounding area. As for our technology, we will focus entirely on the Book of Blood and continuing down towards the growth. The blood is power technology. It gives us more money for our cities and more growth. And we'll continue focusing down the trade to get all the way to the Necromancer / Vampire keep plus 30% income. We want, and since we'll be already focusing down this tree, we'll have access to Blood Knights. And that's going to be in our mid to late game. Mid to late game meaning like around turn 40 to 50. Though this battle seems very close, you could decide what you want to do, but I would suggest having a decent number of skeleton warriors and maybe some zombies, and you'll win the battle. I've yet to lose this battle on an auto. It could be either a close victory or a fair victory.
What?
Once you sack it, simply attack it again and claim it. With this money, we can use it to improve the economic buildings in Eastern Sylvania. Go ahead and get our gold mine to tier 2. And for now, we can just keep in mind that that Schwarzwerfen army is going to be going for the fort to the north. Destroy the barracks in Castle Dragonhof. We won't be using it anymore. We're going to focus more on growth buildings and anything that improves the growth of this province, so we can get to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Schwarzwerfen just completed a raid on the northern fort, and we'll move our secondary army to capture the fort. Now, you could wait and let Schwarzwerfen maybe capture it. The AI is very unpredictable of whether or not it will capture or not. But the thing is, we'll take the fort with our secondary army just so we can summon Manfred von Kastein. However, there is a situation that can happen that's been happening quite often every time I've played this campaign. Stirland will take over the fort.
Commit, minions commit.
Okay, if Sterling's gonna do that, then that's not really a problem. This is actually very perfect. We can get ourselves an early battle site.
Kill them, my children.
We'll focus primarily right now on taking Castle Tempelhof, sack it, and then we'll subjugate them to being a vassal.
Tomb rot.
After we do this,
Death.
we can get into position and get ready to invade Sterling.
Times.
Raise a couple more dead, and go for the Undying Horde. Increase our replenishment. With your 2 stacks, or 1.5 stacks, you can set them into a channeling stance.
Absolutely not.
The size of that Sterling army is perfect to create a battle site. From here, you can decide what kind of buildings you want to build. Should you go for the Giblet? I honestly suggest you wouldn't. It's better to go for the Growth Pit. That plus 20 growth is a big deal. The faster you can upgrade Castle Dragonhof, the better. I think I forgot to set my 2 stacks to channeling. But no problem. From here, we'll declare war on Sterling. It should be no problem. That is their main stack.
It is night. Turn them to death.
Send in Heinrichs. You can send whichever army first you want, but be sure to bring in the secondary army as a reinforcement. And the stacks are heavily on your, well, are much more on your side. If you auto this battle, you will win for sure, and you'll have a battle site with about, it will definitely be about 2,000 dead. Thus, you have a guaranteed site for raising better units later down the road. I would strongly suggest in occupying the fort,
So be it.
just so we can summon Manfred von Kastein. You could let your vassals try to go for it, but they're very unreliable. The vassals are very unpredictable in what they will and will not do. Continue going down for our replenishment. And then now we'll focus on vassalizing Schwarzwerfen.
The rot.
It'll take a turn, but there's no problem with that. We'll continue to focus on economic buildings in eastern Sylvania. I want the Castle Tempelhof to actually start expanding. The mood is a good first choice. This is a very tough choice, and this is going to happen very often in your campaigns, is that random factions, random dwarfs, will be declaring war on your vassals. Some people have suggested to break the alliance and attack Castle Tempelhof again. However, in my playthroughs with the Vampire Counts and Legendary, it's better to be with the Vampire Counts. If you get a Stranger Comes that gives you Chaos Corruption for money, accept it. The Vampire Counts corruption is more powerful, and we're focusing on just controlling one province, Eastern Sylvania. There's no need to invest anything into the fort. We won't. It's just one settlement, and it's not really worth investing in. Upgrading the growth buildings to tier 2 is also not worth it. I mean, it's like 3,000 dark magic for just +5 for 1 recruitment slot and +5 growth. It honestly isn't worth it. Caracadron is definitely a threat. The fact that they are attacking this early puts Waldenhof in a very susceptible position, which I'm actually a little worried because this is very early. They've declared war. However, they didn't attack. It's better to have Castle Tempelhof to be on your good side, because they're more likely to backstab you than Schwarzwerfen. Sometimes Schwarzwerfen will be on a campaign to the dwarfs to the south, but however, in this situation, they had their main stack still in their main capital. Just simply utilizing the 2 stacks, you can take over Schwarzwerfen very easily and vassalize them as well. Tempelhof has advanced towards the moot and is taking it very quickly. From here on, I would mobilize my forces to move very quickly back to the northeastern side of Sylvania to deal with the Caracadron, because I'm still building the defensive buildings just to protect that region.
Let us make doom.
From here, you can also... Schwarzwerfen will be building up its army, Tempelhof will be building up its army, and the goal is to essentially assault Stirland. Let your vassals concentrate on attacking towards the west. The Empire's factions will be breaking your non-aggression pacts, and honestly, if you have to break a non-aggression pact, don't even worry about it. I mean, on Legendary, it really does not matter. The majority of the factions hate you anyway, just because you're a vampire. Summoning Manfred von Kastein, he's essentially going to be replacing our secondary general. And we're going to be using him in the battle, the first quest battle that's coming up. Using Manfred von Kastein is... it makes the quest battle a lot easier, due to the fact that he's got that leech ability, which can kill generals very quickly, and that he's just a very tough character. I mean, he's a vampire lord that's very powerful. And leveling him up very quickly it's always good to do. I mean, that leech ability alone is what can easily change that battle from being more losses than anything. Now, the situation with Averland, you have to decide whether or not you want to attack them or not. When you're this powerful, it shouldn't be a problem. Though you will have some diplomatic penalties, I wouldn't worry about it on Legendary. None of the Empire factions will be willing to trade with you on Legendary. Having your vassals do an assault very quickly in the early game is going to make them very powerful. Do not underestimate of how quickly and how fast your vassals will grow to attack. If you keep 2 stacks up, you'll keep your power strength. Your strength of your faction to be very well known, and it will stay up for quite a while. We can focus generally on our economics, and with our 2 stacks, we can attack any target that threatens our borders.
Thine right is mine.
Essentially, what I'm doing here is just giving Manfred von Kastein my best troops. The skeleton spearmen, skeleton warriors, and essentially we'll be using them for the battle, for the upcoming quest battle. For this battle, I'll skip it because it's a very simple battle. You simply just charge in with your skeleton warriors and flank around with your hex wraiths and use Manfred von Kastein's leech ability on the enemy's general, and the battle is essentially yours. After the battle is over, we'll be heading back to the campaign. I'm fast forwarding a couple turns ahead just to show the ongoing battle that's going on with Averland and Castle Tempelhof. The dwarves in the far southwest have declared war, and Schwarzwerfen is dealing with them very quickly. I've dealt with the Caracadron and forced them to sign a peace treaty after destroying their capital. With my 2 stacks, I will then start attacking Essen. Now, am I trying to hold down Essen? No. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is just cause chaos, cause rebellions to start, take advantage of these rebellions, and simply prepare for my invasion of the north. Whatever method we can do to make money is essentially what's happening. In this campaign, Ostermark has essentially lost its battle against Kislev, and thus the situation you see. What I'm essentially doing right now is I'm trying to make as much money as possible. Since I'm focusing on economic buildings for the Eastern Sylvania, it's going to cost a lot to build the Necromancer Tower, the Vampire Crypt, and the castle upgrades. Now, your vassals might have a hard time on the Western Front. When they're fighting a number of enemies, try to make peace with the factions that are at war with it. Especially the dwarves. The dwarves their stacks are very hard to deal with for the vampires. If you have to send in your stacks to support them, do it. It's worth it for the long term. Is it worth trying to hold Essen? No. Let a rebellion take over. Most of the time it will be Ostermark, or a random empire faction, and let them build up. You don't have to worry about your Waldenhof or Eschen, because by then you should have tier 2 walls defending your cities. So in case the enemy does try to attack you, you can build a force and respond to it. With your 2 stacks, you can support your vassals to the west. Don't take over territory, just sack it or destroy enemy armies, and then just fall back to Sylvania if things get too tough. The great thing about your vassals assaulting the western side is that they'll be creating a lot of battle sites. Like in my campaign, I had about maybe six or 7 battle sites towards the west. So if I really needed a powerful army very quickly, I could just make a new general in Eastern Sylvania, force march him towards one of the battle sites, and just get a super army ready to go. If the dwarves become a threat, or have to make an army against the Warriors of Chaos. I'll be fast forwarding this campaign to what I'm currently at. This is the campaign about 50 turns in. And this is essentially what the end game goal was. Focusing on economic buildings. I got Vampire Crypts tier 2, Necromancer is going to be going towards tier 2, building up the armory to build Blood Knights. The vassals have been doing extremely well towards the west front. They've been fighting the Empire, Whistleland's gone, and the Empire was actually doing a pretty strong counterattack, and I was able to negotiate peace to let my Schwarzwerfen ally regroup and rebuild. And then we'll attack the Empire in about a little later down the road. I'm having a small issue at Beckefan against the Rebellion. I used a quickly built stack to fight and weaken them, but my vassal will more likely finish off the Rebellion. As for my main army, we moved in through Kislev and took over Prague to prepare our defense against the Warriors of Chaos. Now, essentially here, I have to make the tough decision, do I want to fight the Warriors of Chaos or not? There's 2 massive Varg stacks that are triple silver, and they might provide it to be an issue. However, since I focused my generals on replenishment, getting Lightning Strike, Corruption, and getting the minus 15% raised dead cost, essentially raising armies is minus 30%. So it's very cheap. Very cheap to build a massive army at no time. And with Lightning Strike, I can probably beat the Warriors of Chaos pretty easily. Now, the decision whether or not to let the Warriors of Chaos pass through me, it's very tough to decide. I haven't even considered which one I want to do. If my vassal didn't take over a lot of territory to the west, then I'd let the Warriors of Chaos just go on a rampage and destroy humanity. It's fine. And I'll just take over the areas and the ruins and rebuild from there. The big deal to actually capture Kislev so early is something I want to show you here right now. Probably more than likely in that campaign I will be fighting the Warriors of Chaos and just utilizing Lightning Strike to the best I can to destroy them as quickly as possible. It'll be tough to hold down that north region, but I'd rather the Empire factions stay alive to let Schwarzwerfen and Tempelhof take them over easily. The Warriors of Chaos can be very problematic once they start going to the far west, like Bretonnia. The reason to take over Kislev very quickly is that it could be a perfect site to build the Graveguard. At the Fort Yakov, you can build the Unholy Forge, which gives you a huge bonus in recruitment and effectiveness for your Graveguard. Like right now, I've researched the Graveguard tree, and plus that Unholy Forge, you can build triple silver Graveguard units, not to mention the cavalry units. Kislev is a very powerful place to have early game. Whether or not to attack the first wave of chaos is entirely up to you. Focusing on the Book of Blood and the Book of Skeletons is essentially what I focused on with my campaigns. Could you go after with monsters like crypt horrors and stuff? Yeah, you can. But I don't know. It's just my personal playstyle that I prefer to use Graveguard and the Blood Knights rather than the Vargals, crypt horrors, bats, and direwolves. And this is essentially the the conclusion for my short campaign for the vampire accounts. I do hope you guys enjoy the video, though. If you have any questions regarding the vampire accounts strategy in the starter guide, be sure to comment in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.